One of the many great lessons that you should share with a couple that you are counseling with when they are thinking about getting married is the fact that God made men and women differently. We're made differently as shown in creation. As God made Adam, it says that on the sixth day that God created man. And then in chapter 2 it goes into greater detail. It talks about how that God took from Adam, he opened his side and took a rib that he had placed there, and he created Eve around it. He made her differently. God was showing that there are a lot of differences physically, emotionally, between men and women. One of the great lessons that you can share with this couple you are counseling with is the fact that we look at things differently. We see things differently, but those differences are not bad. As a matter of fact, God made them that way on purpose so that we could really complement each other, so that our lives really can complete each other rather than pull apart or rather than cause friction between us, if we understand that there are differences that God has made. Genesis chapter 2, verse 24, Adam declared after God had given Eve to him, therefore shall a man leave his father and mother and cleave unto his wife. Now the word cleave is kind of a funny word, but it could be probably more understandably translated as glued. And what Adam is saying there is that now I am gluing my emotion and my thought, my purpose of life together with my completion. He had already declared that Eve was bone of his bone and flesh of his flesh. He already said that she is a part of me, that she is my completion. So now he's declaring that through that completion, they're gluing, they're cementing their emotion, their thoughts together to a common purpose or a common unit of purpose to form a stronger goal, a stronger purpose, a stronger idea. First of all, there's an understanding that we must be completed by our mate. You need to emphasize the fact that as God made women different, he made them different for a purpose. It doesn't take living with a woman very long to realize that she sees things differently, that she looks at things differently than the way that you look at things and the way that you see things. God made it that way purposely, and the difference is to balance the way that men look at things, the way that men perceive things. Why didn't God's account of creation just say that on the sixth day God created male and female? Why did he go to such an extent to declare that they were made differently? I think the reason is because he's declaring publicly and openly that I made man and I made woman, I made them differently for different responsibilities, for different purposes. I think he declared publicly that Eve was created equal to Adam because after making her, he placed her by his side. He gave her to Adam. I think that he made her differently because the mode of creation was different. And it shows, too, that God had completed Adam and completed Eve, that they really were a part of each other. They were each other's completion because the rib was taken out of Adam and Eve was created around it. So the differences between men and women can complement each other. Why didn't God just make another man for Adam and Eve? Why didn't God just make another man for Adam? Well, besides the obvious physical need that another man couldn't meet naturally, Adam didn't need somebody to compete against. He didn't need another repetition of his abilities. He didn't need another repetition of his talents and the way God had gifted him. What he needed is someone to complete him and to fill the gaps that he could not meet in his life, that he could not or was not equipped to meet. So God made Eve different to fill the gaps that he had not created Adam to meet, so that together they became one complete unit. Well, why didn't he make a dog or a cat for his companion? Well, we've already discussed in the last lesson that he needed somebody who was equal to him, someone who by their own choice could complete, someone by their own choice could join or could meet the needs that were in his life rather than being subdued or subjected into it by instinct. Men and women are different physically. Well, besides the obvious physical differences, there are literally thousands of differences in the physical makeup of a man and that of a woman. Every man's cells are made up of X and Y chromosomes, where a woman's cells are made up of just X chromosomes, which shows that every cell in his body is made differently. We're told that a woman has less blood than a man does in the body, 4/5 of a gallon compared to his 1.5 gallons of blood. He has 1 million more red blood cells than she does, which is why he has more energy and can work at harder tasks longer than that a woman can. She has he has 20% of her body weight is muscle compared to 40% of the man's body weight being muscle. His bones are heavier, and as most women will tell you that they already understand or know, that his skull is thicker than that of a woman. A woman has more insulating cells under the skin. That's why she's so pleasant to touch and to hold, why her skin is so much softer. It's also why it's easier for her to gain weight and much harder for her to lose it than it is when a man. I say all that to say that there are more differences than just the physical appearance that we can see on the outside. Even our brains are wired differently. Again, it's not very difficult to realize or to see that we just see things differently. The way that we reason things are different. Scientists tell us now that there evidently is a chemical that appears in the formation of boys and girls. That chemical will destroy connecting fibers in young boys, and it causes actually the left side of the brain to shrink somewhat. That shrinking or that destroying of the connecting fiber actually causes men or causes little boys to think more laterally, one thing at a time. That connecting fiber being present in the brains of women and little girls will cause them to think more bilaterally. That means that they think about the past and the present and the future all at one time. That's why they're more emotional. That's why they feel things a lot different. When a baby cries during the middle of the night, who is it that will jump the first or have the ability to get out of bed the quickest to go see what the need is? Well, usually it's the mama. Usually it's the woman. Who is it that seems to suffer more or to hurt more when a child cuts his finger or hurts himself, or have more compassion towards the child, even in minor scrapes or even in minor hurts along the way? Well, usually it's the woman, because she feels things so much more emotionally. Everything that she comes in contact with becomes an extension of her emotion. She just feels things emotionally different than that a man does. Because she's bilateral in thinking, watch her, for example, going shopping. She goes inside a mall and goes inside a store, if she's got plenty of time, and she'll go over to the rack trying to find a blouse. As she goes into trying to find the blouse, she'll look at every blouse her size, and she'll think about them. She'll look at them, may even try a couple of them on. Well, she may not decide just exactly right then. She'll leave the store, go into another store inside the mall, and she'll go over and she'll look at blouses there her size and go through the same sequence. She may stop looking at blouses and go over and look at a pair of tennis shoes for her son, or go look at a pair of jeans for her daughter, or go look at something for her husband, and then come back and decide on the blouse. She's thinking at several things at one time rather than just the blouse itself. Whereas a man, when he goes into a store, if he's looking for a shirt, he'll go over to the rack where the shirts are and look at the shirts his size, and he'll not look at anything else or think about anything else very seriously until he finds just the shirt he wants. If it's not in that store, he'll leave that store and go to the store where he finds the shirt he wants. He'll buy that, and then he's free in his mind to look at other things, or probably will just leave the mall and go on home. He's accomplished what he's done. Because he has more lateral thinking, he is more conquer-oriented. He has to conquer his conquest before he can go on or feel free to let loose of what he's thinking and what he's doing. Whereas the woman, being more bilateral, thinks emotionally, and thinks of the past and the present and even things in the future that all tie together in her decision-making process. Look at a man when he takes a trip. If you get behind the wheel, and boy, he grabs the wheel and he looks at it, and he's not going to stop for anything till he gets to his destination. Junior may be yelling in the background, "Daddy, I got to stop, I got to stop." And he's saying, well, we can't stop until we get to Cincinnati because that's where we had planned to stop. He's going to meet his destination. He's got to conquer the conquest. He's got to conquer the trip before he can relax and go in and enjoy other things. Whereas the way that women normally look, the way that women normally see things, is that they can emotionally enjoy other things along the way while they're accomplishing what they're doing. The point is that men and women do things and see things differently. That's a tremendous point of contention if you don't understand it. So many times a woman will say to her husband, well, why can't you see this? Or why can't you understand this? Or the husband may turn to his wife and have already made a decision, and she just says, well, I just can't decide. I've got to have more time to look at it or more time to study it. And what she's telling him is that I'm still looking at the past and the future and the present, and I'm trying to tie all these things together before I can make a decision. She just can't make important decisions real quickly. Notice a woman in conversation. Before she leaves a room, she's going to have to tie together everything that she said. She can't just simply end the conversation and then go on to another conversation or to leave. She's got to tie up everything that she said, because in her mind there'll be loose ends if she doesn't get that past, the present, and the future all together and tied up before she leaves it and goes on to another. Whereas a man in his conversation, when he said what he has to say, he's through and ready to go on to another conversation or go ahead and leave and do something else. That's why there's so much problem in communication between a husband and a wife. It's because the way that we communicate is a lot differently, and we'll talk about that a little later at another lesson. But emotionally, physically, we're differently. Physically, God made us different not only on the outside, but the inside. Our physical needs are different. Emotionally, we're very, very different as well. The way that we see things, the way that we sense things, the way that we make our decisions or what we base our decisions on are also differently. And we need to understand those differences in order to be patient with each other in the way that we come to making decisions, in the way that we look at things. Even conversationally, we are very different. Researchers did tests on little boys and little girls, and they took these little boys and little girls and they put them in a room, and they put these wires on that would record every sound that they would make. And what the researchers found was that 100% of the sounds that a little girl would make was conversational. They found that 60% of the sounds that a little boy would make were conversational. That is, that they were speaking or talking to someone. They were carrying on a conversation either with themselves or with someone else. But they also found that 40% of what a little boy was doing, or the sounds that he would make, were just strange noises, like a motorboat or like a car engine, or just strange humming sounds, just sounds that had absolutely no reasoning behind them at all. The point was that women are more conversational minded. Ladies need conversation. They need small talk. Usually a man, as he talks, and he usually talks a lot, but he comes to a point in a place, and then he drops it and he's ready to go on to somewhere else, whereas a lady usually needs to hear a lot of small talk. Example, a man comes home from work, and his wife will say, well, how was your day today? He'll say, fine. Well, she's needing to hear a little bit more than fine, so she says, well, tell me what went on today. And he said, well, oh, just the usual. I just did the usual kind of stuff. Well, she's needing to hear a little bit more than that and say, well, did anybody call today at work? Yeah, old Joe called me, and she'll say, well, what did Joe say? And he'll say, well, just the usual kind of stuff. He said hi, and he'll have to think about it a little bit, and he asked about you and the kids, and go a little bit further. He asked about how business was, and she needs to hear a little bit more than what he's saying, but in all honesty, he is saying all that comes to his mind. There's a difference between the way that we carry on conversations. There's a difference between the needs that we have to hear in conversation. As a counselor, it's real important that you point out or that you share with the young lady that you're counseling with that her husband will not carry on a conversation like she usually has with one of her girlfriends. And it's not because he doesn't care about her or with her. It's that the way that he sees things or perceives things, the way that he does things is different because that's the way that God made him. It's also important to point out to the young man that his wife will need to hear the little things. She'll need to be made to feel an important part of his life. She will feel neglected. She'll feel that he will not consider her to be important unless he shares the small things that go on. And it may require his developing the ability to remember small things and include small things and to share small things with him because it won't come natural with him. She'll need to hear a whole lot that she's loved because she's more emotional than he is. He'll need to tell her and not assume the fact that she's loved and that she knows that she's loved. He'll need to come in for no reason at all sometimes and put his arm around her and tell her she's the most beautiful woman he's seen all day long, or just to come by and just pat her on the back a little bit and just tell her how thankful he is that God gave her to her, or just come by sometimes and just say, you know, I love you more than anything else in the world, because those are the kinds of things that she really needs to hear, and she really needs to hear it often. But it's not normal or natural in conversation for a man to say those kind of things and to do those kind of things. It's something he's got to learn, and she's got to learn that it's not natural, and that the kind of conversation that will make, or the kind of conversation that he will have with her, is going to be different from the conversation that she will have with another young lady, or with one of her girlfriends. After a few years of marriage, a real common complaint is that we just never talk. And the reason is that we're not aware of the different needs in conversations to hear the different things. The man needs to get to the point. He needs to be able to meet his challenge even in speaking, and then to stop and to go on to another subject, whereas a lady needs to hear the many small points and many things along the way to tie up emotionally what's going through her mind before she can take that out of her mind and go on to another conversation. After a few years of marriage, the wife may say, well, you just don't ever talk to me anymore. And the husband may respond with, what do you mean talk? We talk all the time. All right, you want to talk? Let's talk. What do you want to talk about? Well, I don't know. I just want to talk. And both of them's being very honest. He sees it that they're talking all the time and that conversation is going on. She sees it as though there is no conversation because they're really not sharing those little things, those intimate details, those facts of the past and the little things of the present, and even seeping over into the future to tie everything and every thought that she has together so that her needs conversationally, emotionally, can be met. God made physical, emotional, and even conversational differences in men and women. We are different. Every part of us is different. But understand He made it for a reason. God made her think of things differently so that she could think of things that He will never think of. God caused her more difficulty in making major decisions so that it would slow Him down in making major decisions that He won't make too fast or spontaneous, cause Him to think a little bit. God made the differences to balance each other, not to work against each other. It's a smart counselor who has the ability to share these differences in a way that those that he is counseling can understand that, yes, there are differences. She don't see things like I do. He doesn't hear things like I do. We're made different, but our differences are for a purpose and for a reason.